Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're cutting through the euphemisms and naming names. We're talking about the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF. This isn't a one-off blunder. It's a pattern of institutional misconduct, illegal administrative games that bleed taxpayers, and headline-making operational fiascos that handed guns to cartel killers. For anyone who watches oversight, rogue agency stopped being hyperbole a long time ago. As someone who supports the Second Amendment and lawful gun ownership, I'm done pretending bureaucratic recklessness equals public safety. We're unpacking two case studies that prove the point: a multi-million-dollar misclassification scheme exposed by a veteran whistleblower, and the lingering fallout from disastrous gunwalking. The goal tonight is simple: a precise, unsentimental autopsy of an agency that repeatedly elevates internal politics over competence and community safety, and why that matters for every citizen who expects accountability, not excuses, with real consequences. To truly understand the internal dysfunction at the ATF, we must begin with a seemingly bureaucratic term: misclassification. This is where the Bureau's latest scandal originates, and the details are genuinely shocking, particularly given the large-scale financial implications and the agency's subsequent reaction. The core allegation, brought to light by human resources professional and U.S. Army veteran Meister Aloy Siwajula, was that the ATF engaged in a long-standing and illegal practice of deliberately misclassifying certain administrative and human resources positions as law enforcement roles. Now, why does position classification matter? Because this wasn't just an arbitrary title change. It was, allegedly, a scheme to funnel enhanced law enforcement benefits to individuals who were fundamentally unqualified to receive them. We're talking about things like higher pay scales, enhanced retirement packages, and especially something called Law Enforcement Availability Pay Leap. LEAP is premium pay, often an additional 25% of salary, typically reserved for federal law enforcement officers who must remain available for unscheduled overtime. If you're an administrative employee, a pencil pusher, if you will, you absolutely do not qualify for this kind of bonus. Yet, the whistleblower reported that ineligible ATF employees were indeed receiving LEAP. Mr. Siwajula was instrumental in bringing to light this malfeasance. The USAID's Office of Personnel Management (OPM) estimated that this scheme cost American taxpayers at least $20 million over a 5-year period. Think about that magnitude: millions of taxpayer dollars allegedly wasted on inflated salaries and benefits for administrative positions. The whistleblowers argued that the scope of this illegal practice, including the associated waste, was actually more widespread than what the audits captured. The Office of Special Counsel (OSC) ultimately substantiated these allegations. When an agency's malfeasance is so severe that the federal government steps in, the consequences should be dramatic. In this case, due to the substantiated allegations, the OPM felt compelled to step in and suspended the ATF's authority to classify certain positions until the agency could satisfactorily address the misclassification issues. That is a staggering sign of systemic failure, a federal agency being stripped of basic classification authority because it proved itself incapable of following the rules. ATF assessed that the improper benefits related to the misclassified jobs amounted to at least $9.7 million over the audit period, potentially rising to $19. $7 million if all disputed positions were ruled misclassified. The whistleblower wasn't just identifying waste, he was saving Americans millions of dollars. The problem wasn't limited to the misclassified individuals. The whistleblowers pointed out that the agency failed to account for the impact this wrongdoing had on non-law enforcement employees. The most insidious part of this administrative scandal isn't the millions wasted. It's the immediate and vicious reaction from ATF leadership when the waste was exposed. In a functioning system, a whistleblower who identifies illegal practices and saves millions of dollars should be celebrated, or, at the very least, protected. Instead, Mr. Siwajula, who the OSC honored with the 2023 Public Servant Award for his bravery and disclosure work, was met with sustained retaliation. This was a campaign designed to break him professionally and personally. The retaliation which Senator Chuck Grassley detailed in a letter demanding accountability, included isolation by colleagues and management, negative performance reviews, demeaning comments, and outright intimidation. The retaliation reportedly worsened even after a settlement was reached with ATF leadership to address earlier allegations. The specific acts of intimidation are chilling. In June 2022, the FBI investigated allegations that an ATF special agent had made threats against Mr. Siwajula and another ATF whistleblower. An ATF witness told FBI agents that the special agent stated Mr. Siwajula had a mark on his back, and the witness believed the agent was speaking on behalf of others seeking to harm Siwajula. The FBI referred the alleged threats to the ATF's Internal Affairs Division, IAD, but Mr. Siwajula claims no one from IAD ever followed up with him regarding that investigation. Adding insult to injury, Siwajula was demoted and assigned menial duties. In a particularly egregious move, he was retroactively promoted in name only, following a retaliation settlement, only to be assigned to report to one of the ATF officials he had originally reported for direct involvement in the misclassification scheme. Furthermore, Siwajula alleges that former ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach personally gave orders to find a legal justification to fire him in mid-2022. When the whistleblower was subjected to a subsequent retaliatory internal affairs probe, he was allegedly asked highly inappropriate questions about his national origin and political beliefs. Specifically, the investigator allegedly pressed him on where he was really from after he stated North Carolina, and whether he supported abolishing or dismantling the ATF. The level of abuse became so severe that Siwajula, an Army veteran, stated that his experience working for the ATF under the Biden administration after becoming a whistleblower was on the same level, and some days worse than his experience serving in Baghdad, Iraq. He explained that while serving in Iraq, he could trust his Army squadmates and leadership to have his back. At the ATF, the leadership had instead put a target on his back. This whole situation illuminates a crucial point often lost in government structure. When internal policies fail, especially regarding finances and staffing, the system will immediately turn on the person trying to fix it. This wasn't just financial malfeasance, it was a brazen display of bureaucratic vengeance against a patriot. Now, let's pivot from internal administrative fraud to operational disaster, because the ATF's problems with judgment and accountability are not new. They are systemic. The most notorious example of operational failure is the ATF gunwalking scandal, primarily known through Operation Fast and Furious 2009-2011, but also involving earlier probes like Operation Wide Receiver 2006-2007. What exactly is gunwalking? This was a tactic utilized by the Arizona U.S. Attorney's Office and the ATF Phoenix Field Division, where they purposely allowed licensed firearms dealers to sell weapons to illegal straw buyers. For you legal eagles, understanding the definition of a straw purchase is critical. While straw purchasing itself is not defined as illegal by statute, it is illegal to provide false information in connection with the purchase of a firearm. The stated goal of this tactic was ambitious, if reckless, to track the weapons as they moved across the border to high-level Mexican drug cartel leaders, leading to their arrest and the dismantling of the entire trafficking network. This approach marked a major shift away from the ATF's previous standard practice of simply interdicting guns and arresting low-level buyers immediately. The reality was a devastating failure of execution. During Operation Fast and Furious, the ATF monitored the sale of approximately 2,000 firearms, but the technology failed. The GPS trackers installed on some weapons had a battery life of only a few days, and the signals were routinely lost. This failure meant the guns simply walked and vanished into criminal hands. As of early 2012, only 710 of the approximately 2,000 firearms had been recovered. The human cost of this decision was immediate and tragic. Guns tracked by the ATF in the operation were found at crime scenes on both sides of the border. Most significantly, 2 AK pattern rifles from the Fast and Furious operation were recovered at the scene where UNAD's Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed in a firefight in December 2010. Terry's murder brought the gunwalking operations into the public eye. Beyond Utah's casualties, related firearms have been discovered at numerous crime scenes in Mexico, where at least 150 Mexican civilians were maimed or killed. According to a former Mexican attorney general, the controversy led to international friction. Mexican officials expressed fury and stated that allowing weapons to walk was a betrayal of Mexico, especially since the Mexican government was deliberately kept in the dark about the operation's details due to ATF concerns over corruption and prior failed coordinations. One prominent Mexican prosecutor, whose brother was kidnapped and killed by cartel hitmen in 2010 using guns later traced to Fast and Furious, blamed the violence on the basic ineptitude of these officials who ordered the operation, the sheer recklessness of allowing high-powered weapons, including AK-47 variants, 50 BMG caliber sniper rifles, and FN-57s, to cross the border unchecked is almost unthinkable for a federal law enforcement agency. This operational catastrophe serves as a deadly counterpoint to the bureaucratic fraud we discussed earlier, showcasing a pattern of mismanagement that sacrifices both taxpayer trust and human lives. The fallout from Operation Fast and Furious revealed not just catastrophic mismanagement at the ATF, but also the extraordinary political maneuvers used by the Justice Department to bury the truth. Once whistleblowers like John Dodson went public, Senator Chuck Grassley and Representative Darrell Issa launched investigations. The DOJ initially denied everything. Assistant Attorney General Ronald Weish told Congress in February 2011 that allegations of gunwalking were false. By December, that letter was formally withdrawn as inaccurate. Attorney General Eric Holder insisted he'd only learned of Fast and Furious weeks before his 2011 testimony, yet internal documents proved his office had been briefed a year earlier. Eventually, Holder admitted gunwalking occurred, calling it flawed in its concept and flawed in its execution. Congressional inquiries escalated into a constitutional clash when the Oversight Committee demanded 300 pages of internal DOJ documents. President Obama invoked executive privilege for the first time in his presidency. The move triggered Holder's historic contempt of Congress citation, the first ever for a sitting cabinet official. The vote split largely along partisan lines, but the damage was done. The pattern is clear: high-level bureaucrats shield themselves with executive power, while truth-tellers are crushed. Compare Fast and Furious with the later retaliation against whistleblower Aloy Siwa. Dodson faced termination attempts and leaked smears. Jula endured probes, demotion, and threats, all designed to ruin him. Meanwhile, the DOJ Inspector General's report faulted 14 lower-level staff for missing red flags, but accountability never reached the top. This cycle, protecting leadership while punishing whistleblowers, shows an entrenched culture hostile to transparency and accountability. Whether arming cartels or misclassifying employees to enrich insiders, the ATF demonstrates systemic dysfunction. At its core, the agency prioritizes bureaucratic survival over public duty. And unless that structure changes, we should expect the same failures to repeat. When we weigh the evidence, the picture is stark: a multi-million-dollar fraud enriching unqualified bureaucrats on one side, and deadly incompetence arming cartels on the other. These are not isolated mistakes. They reveal a systemic culture of corruption and recklessness inside the ATF. Start with the scandal revealed by whistleblower Siwa. By misclassifying administrators as law enforcement officers, ATF management secured inflated pay and benefits, an illegal practice that drained taxpayer funds. Franklin Roosevelt himself warned against government employee unions for this very reason. Without a true adversarial negotiation, taxpayers are left unprotected. Here, management gamed the system, placing unqualified people in top jobs while lowering hiring standards and pressuring approvals under political surges. Pair that with gunwalking. Instead of dismantling cartels, the ATF handed weapons to the Sinaloa cartel, contributing to the deaths of federal agents and civilians. Together, fraud and failure show an agency fundamentally broken. So what's the solution? Not reform, but reduction. The ATF should be stripped of law enforcement power and relegated to a narrow regulatory role, like the FDA or EPA. Their scope should be limited to processing federal firearm license and NFA applications, nothing more. Any current agents can move to other enforcement areas or the private sector. If an ATF employee encounters crime, they should do what every citizen does: call the police or the FBI. The lesson is clear: granting ATF sweeping enforcement authority hasn't dismantled cartels. It's armed them, enriched bureaucrats, and betrayed the public trust. The law enforcement wing of this rogue agency must be dismantled. The stories of misclassification fraud and the deadly consequences of gunwalking operations are testaments to why perpetual congressional oversight is necessary, and why whistleblowers like Aloy Siwa and John Dodson are truly the patriots saving America. Siwa refused to quit his job, despite the horrific retaliation. because he believes in upholding the ATF's mission and ensuring the agency follows the law. That determination, in the face of threats of harm and professional destruction, is what separates the true public servant from the bureaucratic opportunist. Senator Grassley has made the correct demand: hold every single person who participated in or directed the sustained retaliation accountable. The Justice Department must stop using legal gymnastics, like executive privilege, to shield incompetence and political maneuvering. When government employees are caught engaged in illegal practices, whether it's misusing taxpayer funds or running disastrous secret operations, the consequences must be severe and visible. We cannot allow the federal government to continue operating as a self-serving entity, immune from accountability. Whether through the misclassification of jobs or the catastrophic loss of life and weapons on the border, the spotlight must remain on the ATF, ensuring that the agency is either reformed into a purely civilian administrative body or, frankly, dissolved in its current rogue state. We deserve an honest government, and we should celebrate those brave enough to pursue that truth, no matter the personal cost. So, what's the takeaway? The ATF faces two damning charges: internal fraud exposed by a whistleblower veteran and external recklessness marked by Fast and Furious. The theme is abuse. Millions squandered. Cartels armed. Accountability evaded. Senator Grassley's demands highlight a truth: bureaucracies protect themselves first, taxpayers last. This isn't about fixing the ATF. It's about questioning its very authority to police Americans. Knowledge is power. Use it wisely. That's my time. Like, subscribe, and drop your objections in the comments. Until next time, keep thinking critically and demanding accountability.